Hello everyone, I'm Dan O'Ferns, one of the professors at Coastal Carolina University. This week we're going to be talking about the structure of flowering plants, and I thought the best place to really kind of show you all the ins and outs of flowering plants is my backyard, using the garden and other plants we have back here as props. As we talked about last week, angiosperms are flowering plants. This means that they don't need water or wind for reproduction. So the sperm is able to travel to the egg as pollen, where once it fertilizes the egg, it creates a fruiting body like this bell pepper. The seed inside of the bell pepper has a higher chance of distribution and a wider range of distribution because animals that eat the bell pepper are more likely to spread its seeds a farther area. So there are two types of flowering plants. The first type is a monocot, and the second one is a dicot. Dicots have two subdivisions. There's herbaceous dicots and woody dicots. So a herbaceous dicot, again, it's going to be like a pepper plant. Lives for one season. It's an annual. Sometimes they're biannuals. Very soft stems. A woody dicot is like your grapevine, oak tree, elm tree, something that's going to have that nice solid woody structure. Monocots consist of your grasses, palms, and lilies. So we're going to talk about the two distinct types and how to tell the difference between a monocot and a dicot. The terms monocot and dicot come from cotyledon. The cotyledon is the embryonic leaf found in the seed of a plant. And monocots, they have a single leaf, hence monocot. So it's mono, one leaf cotyledon. Dicots have two leaves, dicotyledon. So they have two of the embryonic leaves. Monocots and dicots have very different roots. Dicots have what's known as a taproot, kind of like this really, really sad carrot. So it has that one main stalk, or one main stem that shoots down, and then it has smaller rootlets that come off. A monocot root is like this chive. It has a fibrous root tip. So what happens is the roots get to the bottom and then they spread out really, really fast just from that base thing. So all the roots are spreading out equally. So fibrous roots are really good for kind of grabbing soil and holding just that plant right in place and kind of holding onto the soil. Tap roots are sent down for deep anchors. So that's kind of like what trees use to help hold them during those hurricane winds. The main function of a root is to anchor the plant into the soil. So here we have the root tip. So it's a nice longitudinal section. So the first part of the root tip is the root cap. The root cap is there to protect the region of cell division. The region of cell division is where the cells are created for and divided out for the root itself. So some of these cells become part of the root cap. The rest of the cells are enlarged in the region of elongation. So you have the cells themselves getting larger, spreading out. And then the last region is the region of differentiation. In the region of differentiation, the primary root tissues are formed that then form the adult mature root. So here we have a cross section of a herbaceous dicot root. So the outside, you have the epidermis. Now the inside section of the stele, the inner kernel, is surrounded by the endodermis. So in between the epidermis and the endodermis is the cortex. Now, roots' secondary functions are to transport, besides anchoring the plant in the ground, they are also there to transport water and minerals from the soil to the stem to the rest of the plant, and then bring sugars from the plants down to the rest of the roots. So inside the endodermis is the stele, and the stele consists of your phloem. The phloem is there to transport
your sugars, um, and then you have your xylem. And the xylem is there to transport water. Xylem and phloem are your vascular tissues. Monocots and dicots have different structures to their overall stems. The first one we're going to look at is monocot stems. So monocots are surrounded on the very outside edge by the epidermis. This is the layer that protects the internal components of the stem. Now, throughout the whole stem itself, you have the vascular bundles. The vascular bundles are there as the support, so they run the whole length of the stem and are there to help add structure to the stem itself. We're going to go into a little bit more detail in just a minute. Surrounding all of the vascular bundles is the parenchyma. The parenchyma is there to help add a little bit of structure and allow for the spreading out of the vascular bundles. So when we look at the vascular bundle itself, the vascular bundle is made up of the phloem here, which transports your sugars, fibers to help add some rigidity to the vascular bundles. You have the xylem to help transport water and airspace in between. So again, these run the full length of the stem and help add that structure. Now the scattered nature allows for a little bit more flexibility. That's why grasses are able to bend and flow with the wind. Now, there are two types of dicots and they have slightly different stem structures. So first we're going to talk about the herbaceous dicot. Again, the herbaceous dicot has an epidermis around the outside. The epidermis is then followed by the cortex. The cortex is there to kind of add a little bit more rigidity, a little bit more protection for the internal parts of the stem. Herbaceous dicots still have a vascular bundle. Now the vascular bundle is set up in a ring formation around the outside, adds a little bit more strength, a little bit more rigidity. That's why plants such as your peppers, tomatoes don't bend and flex as much as grasses do. So within the vascular bundle, we have the phloem, which are the really small cells for transporting sugar. Between the phloem and the xylem is the vascular cambrium, and then you have the xylem. So that's all part of that vascular bundle. The xylem again transports your water, and the center of the plant is known as the pith. The woody dicots have a different structure. Now, everything is still set up in a ring. This is like why each year you can kind of see a ring in a tree. So the outside is your bark. So the bark of a tree or just a woody dicot has the cork and cork cambrium as the very outside to protect it. It's got a cortex, and then it has the phloem. So phloem again moves sugar. So if you look at a tree, if a tree ever gets stripped just a layer around the outer edge, if you remove all the bark in a ring around a tree, you're removing the phloem. So the tree has no way of transporting sugars from the top of the tree down to the roots. Now between the phloem and the internal parts is that vascular cambrium. It's that break between the phloem and the xylem that we saw. Now, there's no vascular bundles because the xylem is made up of that entire kind of internal structure. So when you're counting the rings on a tree, what you're counting is the growth in the xylem going out. So there's like a summer ring and a spring ring, and each time you have that, that's more xylem, and that's what's spreading out. And then the center of the stem is the pith once again.
Dicots have what are known as net venations. So when you look at the bottom of the leaves, the actual leaf veins that hold the xylem and the phloem traverse out and away. So when you're looking at the shape of the leaves, there's several different shapes. So this on the fig tree has what is known as simple palmate. So when you put your hand over it, it looks like a palm. So that's like your maple trees as well. There's also compound palmate. which has smaller leaves that still make up from that one branching point a palm-like leaf shape. Conversely, there are what are known as pinnate leaves. So pinnate leaves are more of your streamlined leaf shape that come up. So simple pinnate leaves, again, have that one leaf branching from one node point. Compound pinnate leaves have many pinnate leaves branching from one node point.
The internal structure of a dicot leaf, you have the upper epidermis and the lower epidermis. These are on the outer edges and are there to protect the internal cells of the leaf. Now, as mentioned before, dicot leaves have net venation. So the main vein is in the center of the leaf. Now, this has your phloem, which transports the sugars, and the xylem to transport water. So that's like that. That's where the vein is, and that's when you look at the plant. That vein has the phloem and the xylem. Now, the other part of the cell's tissue is known as the mesophyll. So the mesophyll has what's known as the palisade cells, which are on the top part of a leaf. That's why a leaf is so dark in color. And the spongy mesophyll cells, where there's a lot of different air gaps kind of between the cells. So the palisade cells and the spongy mesophyll cells are what are the main components of a leaf that do photosynthesis. So they're generating all the sugars that are then getting past the phloem to transport to the rest of the plant. Now, in the lower epidermis, you have guard cells. So guard cells are two small cells that open and close to allow for gas exchange and allow for the stoma, which is the airspace inside of the leaf, to exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide with the atmosphere surrounding it.
So monocot leaf venation is parallel leaf veins all the way down the plant. So whenever you're looking for a monocot, they're going to have those long parallel veins that start at the base of the leaf and run all the way to the end of the leaf.
The internal components of a monocot leaf are very similar to the dicot leaf. You have the upper and lower epidermis to protect the internal components of the leaf itself. There is the palisade cells and the spongy mesophyll cells that allow for the creation and the making of the sugars through photosynthesis. Unlike the dicot leaf that has that one singular vein, there are, and in this case, 5 different leaf veins that have the phloem for transporting the sugars and the xylem to transport water. Again, when we look at that, the lower epidermis cell, we do have the guard cells that allow for gas exchange with the stoma that will open and close. So this is what it looks like when you take a cross section of something with that parallel leaf venation.
Monocot and dicots both have flowers. Monocot flowers come in sets of 3. So when you look at a lily is going to have 6 petals and then it has 6 of the anthers on the inside. So everything is a set of 3 divisible by 3. Dicots comes in sets of 4s or 5s. So here we have passion fruit vine flowers. And you'll notice they come in a set of 5. So there's 10 petals around the outside, and then there's 5 anthers. Watching, I hope you learned a lot from this video about the different types of flowering plants and their structures. As you go through your next lab assignment, know that you can always email your professor if you have any other questions or need more clarification. Have fun and enjoy learning more about plants.